When it comes to smaller Floridian amusements of the past, the stories usually all sound pretty similar. They hope to ride the coattails of Disney World, only to learn that if too many of them try it, everybody falls off and loses. Well, everybody but Disney. The story of Pirates World is not that story. It wasn't the victim of Disney. In fact, in a few ways, the park was years ahead of Disney World. It was a park full of promise. But with one simple change and a seemingly innocent addition, that park full of promise went up in flames. Bob Minnick was no stranger to theme parks. Like many in the industry at the time, Bob got his start by working at Disneyland during its early years while he was still in college. It was a formative experience that not only pushed him into a career of park management and design, but one that taught him how to do both of them the Disney way. As he later liked to put it, he got stuck in the business of making people happy. He would move on from Disney to work for designer Randall Duell, and as a result had a hand in the design of everything from Six Flags Over Texas, to the Texas Pavilion at the New York World's Fair, to the Universal Studios tour in California. It was in 1965 that he would get to strike out on his own as the new general manager for an upcoming park in Florida called Pirates World. In December of 1965, Fort Lauderdale financier and landowner C.T. Robertson planned to build a $4 million amusement park less than 15 miles north of Miami in the city of Dania. He spent a reported $540,000 for a 101-acre parcel of land and began to put together a team to design, build, and run the park, which included Minnick as the GM. Paul Gross, known for his art direction on films such as Annie Get Your Gun, The Music Man, and several episodes of The Twilight Zone, was hired as the park's designer. Just 1 month earlier, Disney and Florida Governor Hayden Burns had come together to announce Disney's plans to come to Florida to build something. It would be a few more years before Walt's plans for Epcot would be revealed to the public, but it was generally assumed that whatever Disney was working on would include another Disneyland. So to many in Florida, the state was about to see a boom in tourism. It's what made C.T. Robertson's initial story a common one. According to Minnick, early funding issues caused Gross to leave the project and return to MGM. And it was then that Minnick grabbed the opportunity to fill the role of the park's designer. Calling back to his days at Disneyland, Minnick designed a 30-acre park that would be themed around distinct regions known during the Age of Pirates, through 5 distinct lands. It would include the Spanish Main, New Orleans Harbor, the China Seas, Port Royal, and the Barbary Coast. Due to those same funding issues, the attractions would be on the lighter side and would primarily be composed of second-hand rides. The original steeplechase attraction from Coney Island, introduced in 1897, was shipped down to Florida. The more recent log flume ride of the 1964 World's Fair was also purchased for the park. Pirates World would also feature a Swiss Skyway, a carousel, and various other common amusement park rides from the time. All in all, the park would feature 15 attractions. There were also plans for a fort that would be home to a 375-seat theater where guests could watch pirate-themed shows, along with street dramas and period-themed restaurants. And while as much of the park would be as authentically pirate-themed as possible, it would still be as clean as possible too, borrowing from Minnick's time at Disneyland. Finally, another Disney staple that Minnick would turn to for the park was the attention and care put into the park's employees. Everyone working at Pirates World would be dressed in era-specific costumes, and the hiring process would put an emphasis on young, clean-shaven employees who would be held to a high standard of courtesy towards guests. Like Walt in the early days of Disneyland, Minnick was looking to fight against the common belief at the time that amusement parks were dirty, seedy places. It was a fight that he was smart to focus on, because the residents of Dania were not happy with the idea of a theme park in their backyard. Residents of the city, in particular high-rise owners near the park, were quick to oppose Pirates World, calling it another Coney Island and a, quote, haven for undesirables. Hollywood Incorporated, the largest landowner in the area, saw the upcoming park as a threat to their property's value. To them, Pirates World would be an oversized carnival that would drag down an up-and-coming city. So they sued the park's parent company, the Recreation Corp of America, for improper zoning. Their hope was that it would put a stop to Pirates World before it could even open to the public. The city, on the other hand, saw a potential treasure chest. Besides the direct taxes from the park, Pirates World would mean more tourists spending money in Dania. It was also estimated that the theme park would introduce 550 new jobs to the city, so they sought to end the lawsuit. Their idea was that with a simple change in zoning laws, the owners of Pirates World would simply just have to reapply for new zoning, which of course would be approved by the city, and then Hollywood Incorporated's lawsuit would be moot. So in January of 1966, that's exactly what they did. As the park approached its opening day in April of 1967, more details began to fall into place. Stepping ahead of Disney, who wouldn't adopt the business model for over another decade, Pirates World would abandon ticket books and ride tickets for a flat entrance fee. At $3.50 for adults and $2.50 for kids, guests at the park would be able to ride as many rides as they wanted, as many times as they wanted. The opening of Pirates World was a tumultuous one. Just weeks before opening, it was discovered that the contractors building the park, who extended the city's sewer system and connected it to the theme park, had done so without any authorization or oversight from city officials. Beyond just wanting to find out who was at fault for the mix-up, the City Commission decided to postpone granting the park its certificate of occupancy until the park could undergo a complete inspection. It would include not only testing every attraction for safety, but also reviewing the park's entire utility plan, as well as testing their water system's pressure and safety to ensure that the unauthorized work didn't pose a risk to guests. The process ended up pushing back the park's opening by a few days, and even then it was down to the wire. City officials were at the opening of Pirates World on the morning of April 7th, but not to celebrate. They had orders to cut off the park's water and electricity in the event that the testing wasn't completed by the 9:45 a.m. ribbon-cutting ceremony. The tests, luckily, did end up being completed in time, and a reported 1,800 park guests were on hand to celebrate the opening of Pirates World. The initial reception of the park was fairly positive. The rides weren't cutting edge or on the level of Disney, but they were seen as fun. And by the end of the year, it was touted as the 4th largest amusement center in the United States. The park was also praised for its cleanliness, and the staff was commended by local media for their energy and courtesy. Thanks to Bob Minnick, Pirates World was able to capture some of that Disney magic that was starting to sway the public's perception of amusement parks. It was beginning to look like the city of Dania would come around to having Pirates World in their neighborhood. Unfortunately, that wouldn't last for long. In 1968, with the launch of Pirates World under his belt, Minnick would move on to larger projects. He would be one of the first employees hired during the planning and design phase of California's Magic Mountain. That left an opening for the general manager position, a role that would be filled by 26-year-old Bob Hall. With that change, and the loss of Minnick's vision and experience, the park would start to change along with it. In 1969, in addition to adding a handful of carnival rides, Recreation Corp would build a hangar bay-like auditorium for a concert space.
I'll never understand why these kids spend as much money as they do to see a bunch of characters play some god-awful music that's so loud you can't even hear it. Well, who cares? Remember, son, the first rule of business is to make a profit.
The venue allowed for concerts that summer that ranged from 8,000 guests to as many as 13,000. These weren't for small local bands either. Acts like the Grateful Dead, Jethro Tull, Joe Cocker, and Led Zeppelin all took the stage at Pirates World. The city of Dania was initially resistant to Pirates World, but the allure of tax revenue and the reality of a simple, clean theme park changed their mind. Rock concerts in the early 70s, however, that was a different story. Over the following 3 years, residents of Dania grew increasingly upset at the summer concerts, complaining about the noise levels, the crowds, and the drugs. The city tried to combat the concerts with ordinances that limited noise pollution, and at one point the state even entertained the idea of a concert ban in the city, though it never passed. As the acts grew more popular, the crowds following them also grew, and incidents started to become commonplace. During one show in March of 1971, concert-goers who couldn't get into the park by the time the show started began to hurl rocks over the fence at those who were already in the park. The crowd inside, in turn, started throwing rocks back, prompting an hour-long exchange. By the end of the incident, 5 people had to be taken to the hospital, an estimated 50 to 100 cars were damaged, and one firebomb was thrown into a ticket booth. While the theme park continued to do well for itself, with annual attendance averaging around 600,000, it was starting to become clear that the owners of Pirates World were losing city officials as allies. The city of Dania felt that this wasn't what they were signing up for when they okayed the building of a Pirates-themed amusement park. Shutdowns were threatened that same summer over safety concerns, and inspectors would try to look for any little infraction that could give them grounds to end the shows. C.T. Robertson, the park's owner, would fight back and try to have inspectors ejected from the park, claiming they needed a warrant to enter. They didn't. Meanwhile, homeowners in the city began petitions to flat out close Pirates World altogether. Rather than end the shows and focus on the park, the owners spitefully did everything in their power to keep the concerts going, fueling a contentious relationship with the city. In fact, they would add to the lineup by also hosting wrestling matches as well as roller derbies. By 1972, a park that was once praised for cleanliness, fun rides, and friendly staff was now regularly making headlines for drug busts, large fights, and petty crime. Ironically, the park was probably closer than it would ever be to capturing the spirit of pirates, but like real pirates, it was them against the world. But oftentimes in the world of business, profits take priority over principle. Perhaps reaching a tipping point at which the money wasn't worth the headache after years of feuding, Robertson finally offered a deal to Dania city officials. If they were willing to rezone the land the park sat on, he would be willing to close Pirates World, move it somewhere else, and build apartment complexes in that space. Most importantly, he promised that if the zoning change went through, he would cease all future concerts within 90 days. As a threat, however, he also proclaimed that, quote, "In the event we aren't rezoned, we're going ahead with a full season of wrestling, roller derby, and concerts." In a bizarre act of defiance, on the same day as that proposal, Robertson also announced that Recreation Corp would not authorize payment for any occupational licenses levied against the park. City manager Woodward Hampton retaliated by asking the city commission to take the company to court over the $10,000 in licenses that were due. So they did. Making good on his threat, concerts at the park continued as the battle crossed over into 1973. And as the concerts continued, arrests at the park kept rising. It ended up being a popular spot in the city for the recently initiated war on drugs. The theme park itself saw annual attendance drop to 500,000, perhaps as a result of not only the changing reputation, but as a ripple effect of Walt Disney World, which had opened in Orlando a little over a year earlier. It certainly didn't help the company, but it also wasn't the death blow that so many other amusement parks in the state would face in that same era. For a time, it seemed like the war between the city and the pirates would never end. The park kept holding concerts regardless of the arrests or pressure, and the city dragged their feet with giving Robertson his rezoning, as well as an easy way out. Then, in June of 1973, the city got the ammunition it needed to turn the tide of battle. Albeit, embarrassing ammunition. As it had turned out, the city never granted a municipal certificate of occupancy for the concert venue. Legally speaking, the area was never cleared to open to begin with. With that revelation, the auditorium was ordered closed. Of course, the park applied for that certificate in order to resume concerts, but during a safety inspection, it was found that the entire hangar structure wasn't built to code. In order to hold concerts in the space, they would have to tear the entire thing down and start over. And with that, the concerts at Pirates World came to an end. Recreation Corp, seeing the writing on the wall and realizing that they had lost any leverage with the city as well as any goodwill, decided to sell the land to an outside developer. So in December of 1973, Pirates World was permanently closed, citing the imminent sale. Now, whether it was slow government bureaucracy or malicious punitive action, the city of Dania was in no rush to rezone the area. They had gotten what they wanted. The concerts were over. So as the rezoning dragged into 1974, the defunct Pirates World started to fall into disrepair. Recreation Corp claimed that for every month the rezoning wasn't approved, it was costing them $25,000 in interest and taxes. Dania city officials didn't see it as their problem. For the following 2 years, the park became a popular spot for teenagers looking for fun. They were often spotted breaking into the park to climb on old attractions, vandalize the place, and set the occasional fire. That included one fire that would burn down the very concert auditorium that had been the center of so much strife for Dania. The state of the park got bad enough that the city began the motions needed to have the park demolished. In January of 1975, 13 months after the park had closed its doors to the public, Recreation Corp filed for voluntary bankruptcy. The hope was that by listing the park and its buildings as assets, the city would be barred from demolishing them. Even after they had lost the war, Pirates World was finding ways to spite the city. Of course, their plan didn't work. So that September, demolition proceedings began for Pirates World. By the following summer, the park would be gone, and the land, as part of the bankruptcy, was foreclosed and sold to Fidelco growth investors, who years later would build condos on the site. Pirates World was so unique. At a time in which amusements left and right were financially failing due to the arrival of Disney World, Pirates World wasn't one of them. Sure, their attendance dropped like everyone else's, but not by enough to kill the business. In fact, by being built upon some of the ideals of Disneyland, the park potentially stood a chance at a longer life. Maybe not the level of Universal Studios or Busch Gardens, but at the very least, it could have been something like a pirate-themed Fun Spot USA. But that's not how it turned out. Perhaps fitting to the pirate theme, the park leaned into easier money, even if it caused problems with the authorities and drew the ire of the local government. It was an ire that they proudly fought back against. A rebellious existence that was popular in its own right. However, like that of the very pirates they were paying homage to, it was an existence that was bound to end poorly. I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope if you want to see more just like it, you stick around. I also want to take a moment to thank my patrons. Your backing on Patreon allows me to make videos like this without having to turn to sponsorships, which usually cram ads in the front or middle of the video. Instead, you just get this annoying plug at the end here. So if you want to learn more about the Patreon campaign and all of the behind-the-scenes perks it has to offer, check out patreon.com/robplays.